Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, I am joined by Amani Roberts. He is a speaker, author, and DJ specializing in unlocking creativity within hospitality and music professionals. He is the author of DJs Mean Business and The Quiet Storm, which we're going to talk about today. And we'll be keeping track of him at armaniexperience.com. So, welcome, Amani, to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Cameron. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, yes. Well, why don't we start from the beginning? Why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your book?
Nice. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, went to Howard University, majored in hospitality and finance, then started working in hotels. I kind of grew up in the hotel space. All along the way, I had a curiosity and a desire to become a DJ, but I didn't think it was a legitimate career until much later on in life. I was wrong. So I kind of moved around different parts of the country, got to LA, went to Scratch Academy, became a full-time DJ, wrote my first book, DJs Mean Business, then continued on and started to teach at Cal State University Fullerton, wrote my second book, The Quiet Storm, and that's pretty much a quick synopsis of where I came from and how I got to where I am today.
That's excellent. That's very cool. I was noticing in the press material that you were also really focused on Black R&B groups from the 50s and 60s and 70s and why that music has kind of gone out, isn't what it was, all this type of thing. And I can't think of anyone better to talk to about that than a DJ. So, let's dive right into that because that's interesting and compelling. Let's dive right into that. So let's get what happened. I guess would be the starting. We'll work backwards from there. What happened? Why did R&B lose its radio shine?
Yeah, because that's a good way of asking it. Because R&B definitely is out there. It's still being created, performed, selling out stadiums, getting gold albums. It's just that the specific genre that I was focused on was R&B groups. You know,
Yeah,
from the 50s to the mid 2000s, we dominated the charts, the radio, and then as soon as pretty much Destiny's Child went solo, things kind of fell off, and it just stopped. They just stopped getting a lot of radio airplay and just as much significance in the public eye. I think a
yeah,
couple things happened. We talk about the Telecommunications Act of 1996. That was supposed to diversify radio, but instead radio went to more playlisting format across the country. So you can be in Chicago, LA, DC, Miami. You're generally going to hear the same songs on the radio because it's all playlisting. That was one big factor. We had a lot of the African American publications, Ebony, Essence, Jet, even Vibe magazine. They all kind of went away. Some came back in digital formats. Essence never went away, but now it's only sent out like twice, every 2 or 3 months, every quarter. So that hurt because that was the primary earned media for R&B groups, and
mhm,
so that hurt. Then you have the emergence of like technology. So we went from a more album based community in terms of music, you'd consume a whole album, to more single based. First with like Napster, which came about, and then you have iTunes. Now you have Spotify. So you don't need to get a whole album to hear a group or hear artist, and that takes the single to be more prominent. And R&B albums and like rock albums, they tell stories, so they want you to get the whole album. So that really hurt. Those are just some of the factors that kind of come to mind in terms of what happened.
hmm. Yeah. I mean, a lot. Some people would say, well, music trends come and go. It had its time in the sun, and then that was it, and sort of thing. And so, why do you think? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Are you agnostic? Why? What's the matter? Is there something the matter?
Well, I think when you look at hip hop now, which is the dominant genre, even like pop music, like they still sample some of the biggest R&B groups and biggest hits of all time. So it's still
True.
relevant. It's just relevant in a different format. And so the goal of the book is just to really kind of show and tell people, okay, you really love this song. Now, did you know that it samples this certain song from back in the day? Just to kind of keep R&B music, R&B groups kind of top of mind so that people don't forget about it and don't assume that some of the hits they're loving today are not as original as they might think. Like they're sampling music and they're interpolating music from the past also.
Yeah, that's I find that very frustrating with modern music. Like there's whole artists where it's kind of like you're not doing anything new, you're not adding a voice, you're reinterpreting the past. I mean, which is the cultural moment that we're in, and I get it and I understand the reasons why, and we talk about them here often sort of thing. Um and I think a lot of that is, you know, especially now kids don't, back in the day, you listened to whatever was on the radio in the car that your parents decided. You oftentimes watched TV that you had no interest in because your parents decided it was what to be. And the kids now don't do that. They have
Yeah.
iPads, they have smartphones. So they have no exposure to anything before they were born or that they are not expressly interested in. And as someone who grew up very sheltered, they come off as very sheltered, because they don't have the experience of being kind of like, oh yeah, like when you were at your grandma's house, you had to watch Murder She Wrote, not because you loved Angela Lansbury, but that's what was on, sort of thing. The kids now, they don't have that experience of getting exposed to all this different stuff, or you may not love your parents' music, but you knew what it was, sort of thing. Nowadays, no, they're on the couch, headphones on, iPad.
Yeah.
They're off in their own world, not exposing anything. So yeah, so then you look at someone like an Ava Max who just reinterprets the '80s, and it's like, yeah, that's probably the first time her audience has ever heard that music.
Yeah.
Because they have no cultural reference beyond their own exposure, which is so limiting. Like
It is
that's
very
kind of
limiting.
sad, isn't it? Like I
Yeah.
get sad, sort of sad
Hmm.
about it.
I don't
Um,
disagree. Yeah.
yeah, it's an odd thing. So technology's a factor. Um, I I want to get into the industry a little bit because I think the industry has not served this genre well.
Oh, why?
Um,
Why do you say that?
well, you're the experts. We'll see if my little theory holds any water or not.
Okay. Okay.
Um, I feel like there has been a obviously the industry picks its favorites and its winners and losers. That's not new. I feel like especially post Destiny's Child over the last decade, maybe a little bit beyond, the industry has picked and pushed a very specific type of person from a very specific type of background, and that has limited the music and the art. That's my little theory. That there's been some favorites gone on behind the scenes of people that are in a very specific way, in a very specific vein, and anyone who doesn't sort of really fit within that narrow thing, you know never really gets that breakout move. They never get that push the
Hmm.
way that they could, or would, sort of thing. And I was wondering if you felt that that was a good observation, or if I'm just crazy. I could be crazy.
Yes. No, you're not crazy. Tell me, give me an example of an artist that you feel fits into that. Like who got the attention and the push?
Well, I mean, I feel like, especially in this genre, I feel like your your Ariana Grande got pushed more than maybe Doichi has. Um, Kelly Rowland should have had a much bigger career than she didn't.
Okay.
Um, Although she's very famous in the UK, weirdly, sort of thing. But that's, I think the way the industry just sort of dropped Ciara, and then she went off and did her own thing and was arguably as if not more successful, was quite. I mean, she said in an interview at one point, she's like, "Yeah, they thought my music was so worthless. They just gave me my masters for no
Mm,
charge because they didn't find any value in them." And then she releases a huge single shortly thereafter that calls back to Michael Jackson, the hugest thing in the world, all this type of thing. The career's still going. I feel like there's a lot of there. It's not a lack of talent.
mhm.
It's a lack of the industry choosing who they want to and to not deal with. And some people get pushed heavily, and a lot of others
Yeah.
don't. And I think it's just a black thing. There's a girl named Banks who does this really poppy, dreamy, lots of R&B beats, very kind of dark stuff that literally could be the next Lana Del Rey, and no one's ever pushed her. She's been around for a decade. music is fabulous. She's never gotten pushed ever,
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
thing. And so there's just all it's like there's just a lot of great talent running around, but the industry picks their favorite or favorites, and that's it. And it's gotten real bad. And I think, but and to tie back to what you're saying, I think the technology, the lack of music discovery, all this type of thing makes it very easy to do that. You pick
yeah.
your people, you push them onto the playlists at the radio stations. They're the ones that get the ads and earn media and the Apple Music tie-in and the YouTube tie-in and all this type of thing. And all of a sudden they're a huge thing. Meanwhile, there's somebody else making way better music, and the
Right.
only reason people don't know about them is because the industry decided, we don't like you.
Okay, okay. So I think I don't disagree with you. I think also like when we hit the maybe like the 2000s, I think record labels made a decision and they decided to really really push and promote and support hip hop more so than R&B. R&B
Mm,
was more expensive because you have like choreography, you've got makeup, you've got three, four or five different artists to kind of wrangle. And so
mm-hmm.
labels made a concerted effort to allocate more money to hip hop because usually it's a singular artist. They're usually playing on a track. You don't need background musicians, so it's just more affordable. Because as we entered into like the music recession, 2008 to 2013, they had to cut costs. They had to figure out what was more affordable. And you'll notice a parallel there was a week in July in 1997 where 12 out of the top 20 songs on the Billboard Hot 100 were R&B groups. You fast forward a decade to 2007, 14 out of the top 20 songs were hip hop songs. And so you can see how that was the early signal. Then you get to the recession, then you also have like when we were growing up, you go to the record store. You go to the record store
Mm-hmm.
to search for records. You go there for meet and greets, all sorts of things.
Yeah,
Well, mom and pop record stores have gone from having approximately 9,100 in the US to less than 2,000 2 decades later. That's a
yeah.
huge drop off. So you factor that in. Then you look at, and feeding into your point, I think Billboard just released a fact today or yesterday where this is the first time since 1990 where there hasn't been a hip hop artist in the Billboard Hot 100. So you look at like 35 years, there's been a hip hop artist in the top 100 until this week. That's staggering. And that just shows you more evolution to pop to all these other genres. So it's interesting, but I do think, and record labels wouldn't speak about it, record executives wouldn't speak about it on the record when I was doing my research, but it
Mm.
was noticeable in the industry. Like they made a decision to pursue and promote and push hip hop artists and acts more than R&B acts.
No, that's a very interesting thing. Yeah, with the drop off of hip hop on the charts, a lot of the MAGA trolls on Twitter are claiming that, the black people are over, they're not cool anymore. It's time for a rock resurgence, all this sort of thing. Everything's political now.
Yeah.
But yeah, and this is gonna air later. We're recording this on October 31st for the listener who will hear this later on. But yeah, it's a quite interesting sort of thing. Let's talk a little bit about that research though. What was it like researching this?
It was a lot of work. It took the book in itself took 4.5 years to write. I developed kind of an algorithm which would factor in notable performances, Grammy nominations and wins, Billboard Hot 100 hits, and record sales. And so you factor that in, and then decade per decade, you get these like groups that had a certain score, and you just rank them alphabetically.
Mm,
Notable performances really, really important in the 50s, 60s, and 70s because it wasn't very common to see an R&B group on the Tonight Show. It wasn't common for them to be at like the Kennedy Center Honors, so that weighed more heavily as you go further back. And so that's
right.
what the research was doing. Then I had to research each group, their story, how they found each other, how they got big, and maybe how they broke up. And then you also got to figure out all their Billboard Hot 100 hits, Grammy nominations, Grammy wins, and then their samples. What are some of my favorite samples and my favorite songs? So it was like different stages of research that I had to go through to finally get every chapter, every decade, and then add my research, which was based on my thesis when I went to Berklee College of Music for my for grad school.
Yeah, no, It's no wonder it takes 4.5 years. You know, that's a lot of things to cross-reference and match up and read about and rabbit holes to fall down and
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's quite significant. Um yeah, what do you what do you think is the biggest difference between the early groups in the 50s, 60s and 70s and we'll call it the peak in the
Right.
90s and early 2000s?
I think the difference is that, first of all, the early groups, some of them didn't even weren't even allowed to have their pictures on the albums. That was the early ones, so many people didn't know who they were listening to at first. They thought it could have been a white group, or they just didn't know. So the music really took preference. The music really stood out, and that really caused people to love it. I
Mm,
think there were fewer genres earlier on, so they had more opportunity to stand out. Radio was much more dominant back in the day, although radio was pretty dominant in like the 90s too, but it was even more like that was it. Radios and you get a record or an 8 track. And then I think
right.
as you get to like the 80s and 90s, video started to be very important. So people could get the more visual aspect. That's the evolution. Then we kind of evolved to like CDs. And then concerts were a bigger deal, sponsorships. There was just more aspects of the music industry. And then very slowly, you get to the 90s and the 2000s, artists started to become slowly but surely more educated about the business, which caused some just differences to go on. Um, so that's some of the differences of the early artists compared to the peak artists. And I say the peak was probably the 90s was the peak.
Yeah, no, that's no, I definitely under no, I think that's no, I think the loss, I don't think people, especially if you didn't grow up with it, understand like you weren't anybody till you got on the radio.
Hmm. Hmm.
That was a thing until about 2008. Like, you know, that was like yeah, like once that was I mean, and that a whole career. I mean, people I mean, essentially like a one-hit wonder like This Is Sisters, The Pointer Sisters, like that, you know, yeah, that, I mean, you could, you know, and there are people at music festivals today who had one hit 15
Yeah.
years ago and they're still doing festival, like, you know, sort of thing. That, I mean, that was the whole, and it's not that way, it's not that way now at all.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
I
reversed
kind,
now. I think it's reversed.
yeah,
Nowadays, the radio hits come last. You blow
yeah,
up, you get bigger, you're bigger, and finally the radio will play you. They're late, whereas before they were early.
yes, and I find also what I also think is interesting about now is especially as someone who grew up in the 90s and everyone was afraid of monoculture and all this type of thing. I wrote an article called Once We've Heard Monoculture, Now We Have No Culture. Because everything is so balkanized now.
Hmm.
I mean, there are you know you'll meet somebody and they'll be really into three or four artists. You've heard of none of them. Doesn't matter how old you're, all this type of thing. People are off on their own, you know. And I mean, and the cool thing for creatives now is you have a chance to have a career in a way that you would have never had in the past without a label and radio play and all that stuff
Yeah.
and all this type of thing. But it also as someone who loves to talk about this stuff, it's also really hard because you also have nothing shared, which I think is I think people need that. You know, we need the thing that the common music, the common story, all the and we have none of it now. We
Yeah,
don't have
it's
any common stories because we don't all watch the same TV shows. We don't have common music because we're not even among, you know, a group of people who should all be listening to somewhat of the same thing. It's all balkanized. It's all individual and personalized now. And that I don't know, do you feel like there's some loss in that?
I think there's loss on a bigger scale. It just really encourages artists, speaking of them, to really kind of find their 1,000 true fans. Like that's what the plan is when I teach and coach my artists. I say, let's get you to find 1,000 true fans, following the Kevin Kelly format that are going to
Yeah.
love what you do. And then they'll spend $100 at a minimum a year on what you put out. And then you could start from making $100,000 and grow from there. And I think that that's why it's so important nowadays, where you'll see people who have like these really strong communities, and they have this great direct fan to artist connections that they consistently do. So they might have a micro community of maybe 3 or 4 thousand loyal fans. But if they're going to like a venue where the cap is maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people per city, they're gonna sell out because they have such a loyal fan base. Now, if you try to get them tend to fill an arena or stadium, that's a little harder. But that's where they first start to grow and really get their communities is they have like these smaller micro communities and they just stay with their fans and they grow. So where we might not hear someone, you have 5,000 people that come to their shows and attend everything all the time. So I think it's developed, it's like little different cities within the music industry compared to like we have one big place where everyone listens to, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. And yes, and I'm so glad you brought up the Thousand True Fans thing because as a content creator, Lord knows I've heard that a million thousand times. And in 10 years at the Cameron Journal, we've never really achieved that yet. Um,
Keep at it.
oh,
It could happen. It can happen.
Yes, yes. Although I recently switched some of my writing to a newsletter format, and that does have about 1,000 person open rate, which is really good. Um, and we love our Cameron Journal Plus subscribers, which is lovely. People are doing that sort of thing, and I work with a company where we build brands for thought leaders, and it's really amazing to watch these communities develop, sort of thing. It's I interview people about books and have a lot of other conversations, but my primary genre is kind of news politics, and that's a very hard genre
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
well in.
Yeah.
And that makes things a bit difficult. I do find, and I always laugh when I kind of break out of that into the cultural commentary and society stuff. That always does tend to do better. And
Yeah.
I just started a morning zoo type of show with a couple of buddies of mine, and we just did episode 18, and it is in the last in the last 4.5 months, it is as popular as this show already,
Yeah.
and it took me years to build what I have now. So which is just emblematic of how difficult it is
Yeah.
in the space that I chose to occupy. But yes, that is kind of how it is now, and I don't know. I kind of miss the thing. I kind of miss that universality sort of thing.
Yeah.
I miss, people being well known and people being aware of people. The whole balkanization thing is like, even in dating it makes it hard. Like, you feel like, with your music you're trying to, like, it's like we have to figure out where to put all the plates and cups. We have to figure out whose furniture we're keeping, and we also have to figure out what music works because we don't all listen to there's no universality anymore. And I think I'm probably the only person that misses about that or cares about it. I think most everybody else is quite happy to just have their own thing in their own universe, but I miss it,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
I
Um
understand. I understand.
yeah. The other thing that I think is funny, speaking of relevance and all this sort of thing, I don't know if you noticed this. Have you noticed that in a lot of these nightclubs and whatnot, they're not playing the new music?
No. Yes.
I'm amazed. So I worked in nightlife from 2011 to about 2014, and I am shocked. I will go out somewhere or I'll see video of something or whatever have you, and I'm kind of like, who forgot to update the playlist from 2013? It's
Well,
Check's calendar 2025. Where is it? So you're a DJ, I'll put it to you. Where is the new music and why is it not? What happened?
when you listen to the new music, think about what songs are there that you can really like dance to and get into it. That's the first
Yeah,
question. There's not
right.
that many. Most of them are. It's different now. It's like down tempo. It's kind of like a little bit of mumble rap mixed in. There's not a lot of like anthems that people know that crosses genres, crosses generations, that cause people to dance. Like, I'll give Bruno Mars credit. He's got Uptown Funk. That's probably one of the biggest songs in the past 10 years, 10, 11, 12 years. That song
Yeah,
still will work because people know it. It also interpolates an old R&B song, "Oops Upside Your Head" by the Gap Band. So that's how they get the even young, older generation. So you have
yeah,
very few. Notice the songs that do well. When Dua Lipa did her remix, Cold Hard remix with Elton John, that one did well because it had an 80s feel and it took 80s. And then you
yeah,
had a legendary artist. So you see the songs that do really big. Sabrina Carpenter, some of her songs will do well, but she's kind of singing it sounds like the 80s. So you can see kind of what artists are doing. But really, there's not a whole lot of songs that come out that are like club anthems and club things. You have some stuff by like even Kendrick's song. Like I don't know if they're not like us, will be cranking 5 or 7 years from now. Now it was hot for a good 2 years. It's still pretty hot. You go across the country, across the world, you'll still hear it. But there's some songs that just transcend genre, transcend generations. And I think as we go on, we get less and less of those. Like I'm trying to think song of the year. There's certain songs of the year, song of the summer. Even 2 summers ago, you had Running Up That Hill. I always forget the artist's name,
Kate
but that,
Bush,
yes, but that was she put that out in the 80s. That became a really big
1986,
song.
yeah.
That came a
Because of
really big
Stranger
song from
Things,
Stranger
yeah.
Things. So you
Yeah.
see how the big songs aren't really the new songs. They're either something that's remade, something that's remixed, or something that sounds like the 90s or the 80s, maybe even the early 2000s. But those songs, and when you're DJing, people just have a nostalgic view. You can put on Chingy, you could put on some Nelly, you could put on a lot of
Hmm.
older songs, but it still works because people, it's just the feeling you get, the rhythm, and it's just things you can sing along to where that's not as present in current day music.
No, I think that that's the best explanation I've heard. I had kind of reached a similar conclusion, mostly because I feel like we've kind of had this problem before in the late 90s into the early aughts. There was kind of a little bit of a dance dearth in there. And I say this because some of the remixes from that period are entertaining. Someone really worked hard to try to make some of this stuff dance music sort
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
And it was really cool, like especially, being a young person in the mid aughts and all this type of thing, that, the song you heard on the radio, because yes, that's how old I am, or the song that you were rolling out to, that also either was danceable on its own or someone puts a really great beat underneath or whatever have you, and it becomes an excellent dance track. So that was kind of really cool because that was kind of a bit of a difficult thing for a while.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's quite interesting. I want to talk about award shows a little bit because you had all that research into who got what hardware sort of thing. Um, I I think the problem with a lot of these music awards shows, and I don't know if you have this impression, it's so political and it's so rigged. Like, and especially speaking as a bitter Mariah Carey fan, because the Grammys have been screwing her and all of us over for decades at this point. Um, I feel like, I mean, it's the worst kept secret now in music. They pick who they want to elevate and who they want to and all this type of thing. It has nothing to do with sales. It has nothing to do with the popular feeling. It has nothing to do with any external thing. It's the same thing. They're picking their winners and losers and who gets hardware and who doesn't. How
Okay.
did you, in all your research into all that, how did you find that maybe that was a thing? What did people tell you? What is going on with these crazy award shows? I guess is my question.
Right.
Because I'm
I'll
a bitter
also
lamb who
say,
thinks we've been screwed over.
I'll
So.
also say I am a lamb as well. I don't know if you can see my background, but I have a Mariah Carey cover right there from when she was on Vibe magazine. I love Mariah, like
Hmm.
she's one of my top artists, so I'm there with you. I think the award shows it's very interesting. Through my research, I was shocked to find that certain groups never won a Grammy. The Jackson 5 never wins a Grammy. That was very shocking. New
Yeah.
Edition never wins a Grammy.
Which
So
is
that
odd that they're so huge. I mean
yes,
that, yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
So no member of them, even when they went solo, Johnny Gill, Ralph Tresvant, Bobby Brown, Belle Biv DeVoe, never won a Grammy. So
Right.
that's what continued to open my eyes. I do understand the whole, I don't want to say pay to play, but it is definitely political. The challenge, though, is that you have the Oscars, you have the Emmys, and you have the Grammys. And so you generally want to have some sort of like landmark or foundation in terms of award shows to include in the research. But that's why I picked four things. I didn't just do it on Grammy nomination and Grammy wins. I also included record sales. I also included Billboard Hot 100 hits, even though that can kind of be gamed now also a little bit. So I tried to spread it out so that the cream would rise to the top, which I feel it did. But I do think that some award shows, yeah, the award shows are a tough one, and especially because they have campaigns now, and it's kind of known if you spend like $100,000 on the campaign, you'll get an award, at least a nomination. So it's not as pure as we once thought. Now, maybe it wasn't pure back in the day. I think as the years continue to go past, it gets less and less pure. That's kind of my opinion, and it just
Yeah.
depends on, who you networking, who knows you, that's on the committee, and how well you do, maybe what you stand for. Like, I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is also pretty similar. Like, there's some artists over
Hmm.
there. Mariah Carey's one. She hasn't been there yet. Sade's another one. Like, how do you have
Hmm.
some of these artists that are legendary that aren't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? So between the award shows and these Hall of Fames, it's just a lot of fuzzy math, as someone once used to say.
Yeah, I mean, especially, and you also look at some of these other things like the AMAs and the VMAs. Like, the VMAs are barely relevant.
Right.
The AMAs are so bad, people aren't even showing up anymore. They're doing stuff to tape from their pool,
Yeah.
sort of thing. Um, I mean, the young kids go because it's a fun show. They're going to go drink and have sex afterwards, and God bless them for it. But like anybody over 30 is like, yeah, I'll pre-tape from my pool, post
Yeah.
that, and sort of. I mean, and I don't know. Like I'm just getting on in years because I remember when those shows were the
Yeah.
VMAs were appointment television. The AMAs were aired. Get this, kids! It was aired on network on ABC, and we all sat down and watched it. That's the world that we grew
Yeah.
up in.
And artists would
Yeah,
show up,
yeah,
and sing and perform, and
yeah,
it's just
yeah.
different now. The way that we consume content is so different, and traditional TV and the traditional award shows haven't adjusted. Like, there's a lot of like live streaming aspect that should be included, and a lot of other content that could be made to make it more relevant. But it takes a long time for these traditional TV properties to adjust, and they're still kind of stuck in the past.
No, that is definitely true. I'm patiently waiting for a streamer to take on one of these award shows. And I think YouTube will probably take one at some point.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that the ratings for TV are just not there anymore. Network doesn't get up and go to the bathroom for 3 million viewers. But on YouTube, that's great,
Hmm.
and that's
Yeah.
just live. What are you going to afterwards? All this type of thing. I think some of those smaller shows are going to go out to streaming. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think you, especially because YouTube's now the primary music discovery platform, YouTube is going to snatch one of those up,
Yeah,
and it
they
will be,
should.
a
It'll be
whole thing.
good. It'll be interactive. Nowadays, if you know, people they watch TV with two or three screens. Like, they have the
Yeah.
show on, but they got their phone on so they can text with people, talk about the show, or maybe they can comment on like a live stream. So the sooner the networks, if possible, or like a YouTube embraces the two or three screen method for watching a TV show, even sports. Like on sports, you watch the game on TV, but you might be on Twitter talking about it. You might be in someone's Substack talking about it. Like, gone are the days
Yeah.
where you're just focused only on the TV. So whatever property adjusts and addresses and meets the need of people who have two or three screens while they're watching something will end up on top and be able to take that and run with it.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I think sports has already kind of shown the way as they usually do with the whole sports betting thing. They've got that stuff going along the bottom of football games now. They've got the little fan duel thing. I mean, the sports is, they're already kind of anticipating, yeah, we know you're on your phone making bets during this, so
Yeah,
let's get in
embrace
on
it.
that
And
ourselves.
and their
You know,
shift was quick. Like, for a long time, they didn't even want sports teams to be based in Las Vegas. Now
right.
you're a year or two from having baseball here, and then the next NBA expansion is going to bring a football basketball team here. You have all major sports here, but that was a very quick shift. So they
It
shifted
was.
quickly. Props to the sports industry.
Yay, no, absolutely. And as someone who used to live in Seattle, if they don't put the Sonics back, people will riot, just
Yeah.
FYI.
I think that's the
Um,
two. Seattle and Las Vegas are coming next for basketball, in my prediction.
yes, well, basketball is the only thing not in Seattle. Now they have a hockey team. It's the only thing not there. So the NBA is missing out on the big PNW market. But that's a whole other discussion. We're here to talk about music. But yeah, I feel like, yeah, it's a quite sad. Everything just feels so diminished from what it was.
Yeah.
Sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that's a fact, but we can't give up. And when I say we, I'm talking about like R&B lovers, R&B groups. I think we have to continue to evolve, continue to figure out ways to stay relevant, stay top of mind. You have like sync licensing where you can get your songs placed in movies, TV shows, commercials, video games. Like, that's where you could kind of find some of the newer, younger people. So I think as a genre, R&B music just needs to continue to evolve to stay relevant.
Yeah, as someone who is a classically trained flautist and kind of played in that world for a little while, I wish that I had been I wish I was a little bit younger because when I was doing it, we were in the awkward middle. All the stuff you just talked about hadn't really happened yet, and no one knew what to do with me. So I moved on because there wasn't really any market for it. Whereas nowadays, there's a lot of really great classical artists who are doing fabulous things on social media. We did not have TikTok back in the day. We barely had YouTube. Okay, kids,
Mhm.
that Google bought that in 2005. I was 17 years old. Like it just so yeah. It's whereas now you can be doing wonderful things on TikTok. The technological production of what you can do by yourself, well, at a studio is way more. I never did a whole lot because I couldn't scrape together money for studio time because a lot of the technology wouldn't be around yet,
Yeah.
yet sort of
Yeah.
thing. And so yeah, yeah, I sometimes feel like a lot of the malaise of people my age is that it's the classic case of we're too old to take advantage of the new stuff, but we're too young to take advantage of the old system. And so we're just perpetually caught in this weird middle. No matter how old we get, whatever happens, we're just always caught in the middle
Yeah.
at the tail end of things and all this sort of thing. That's another show. But yeah. No, it's good. It's good. So what do you think? We're getting close to time here. I've talked your ear off unnecessarily,
It's okay. Great
but
conversation. No worries. Go ahead.
no, thank you. What do you think was the most surprising thing you learned from all this research and writing this book?
Oh, I think there were so many individual facts that really just still surprising. I think I mentioned a few. No Grammys for the Jackson 5 New Edition. In Vogue never had a number one song. Just how the majority of groups throughout the entire 6 decades I did research on broke up because of either drug use or record label disputes. That was the common theme in terms of any groups from the 50s all the way up to the mid 2000s. And that's why it leads me to like, I'm so passionate about trying to help and educate the artists of today so they don't have to suffer the same fates in terms of education, knowing their rights, owning their music. Like you hear so many stories about artists who were big 30, 40, 50 years ago that are just now getting their masters recordings back. Anita Baker is a big example. She just got hers
Hmm.
back. She was big 35, 40 years ago. You start to see more and more artists getting it back. And that just in my research, I just saw that time and time again. Record labels disputes, artists going broke. And it's not because they weren't successful. TLC is a big example. It's because they did not have the education or the knowledge to make the best decision as possible. Or once they figured out that something was wrong, they didn't have the confidence and support to make some changes quickly. And that was another surprising thing. And just, back in the day, most of the artists didn't get any songwriting credits, but yet radio play was so important to them. Well, you're not going to get paid as an artist if you don't have your songwriting credits. If you're the songwriter, then when your song gets played on the radio, you get paid. So that is like one of the major gaps where they had to depend so much on touring that if they were just the songwriter on the track, they could have gotten money then, in the middle, and now. So those are just some of the things that really surprised me, broke my heart, and it just really kind of fueled me even more to help continue to educate artists on that topic.
No, no, that's not. No, I mean that's the first thing. A lot of these, hip hop guys will always say, learn the business because if you don't, they'll flash a big amount of money that you've never seen before, can't comprehend, not realizing that you're gonna go broke and there's actually bigger money on the table that you have no even clue is even being made. And that's, and to shout out to my dear love Mariah Carey, I was in a TikTok comment section and I said, the reason that woman is worth $800 million is because she did not sell
Hmm.
her rights for $5,000 in 1983 when incidentally she could have used $50, much less
Yeah,
5,000. She
yeah,
was smart and held on to it, and that's why the money is long. That's why she just shows up for Christmas, sings one song, and cashes a check for millions. Like
yeah. Yeah. Now she still tours too. She still has a tour and residency, but yeah, I think
Yeah.
because you're
She's doing
referring
the
to this.
Christmas residency in Las Vegas this year, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
fun. Yeah.
she's here every year, and so I think the story that you're referring to was in her book, and she talked about how at first she had an agreement that was written on a napkin with the producer that wanted the rights, and at first she was going to agree to, but then she tore it up. So she made a very wise decision back in the day, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
No,
I
and everyone will tell you to absolutely 110% in the business. And even in the world I come from with book publishing and whatnot, I tell people the same thing. You have to understand how this business works.
mhm.
To make any money at all, it's very hard to make money selling books. But to do anything at all, you have to understand the business.
Yeah,
And music is just as bad, especially when, you're young, you're hot, the music's good. You're going to attract people who are absolutely willing to flash a seemingly to you a lot of money for what you do that can solve a lot of problems in your life. But if you don't understand all the ways in which that music is being monetized and all the ways they're cutting you out of income streams, you end up with what happened to TLC, and
yeah,
many other
yeah.
things.
Yeah. You're preaching
Yeah,
to the choir here. Like,
I
I
know.
tell all my artists an advance is a loan. You need to
Yes.
pay that back to the label through recouping. They're going to be taking all your profits from your streaming, your mechanical royalties, even album sales until you pay them back. So just don't go spending that on a car or a house. Like, put it into the work so you can make it back quicker.
I had a conversation with a book author this morning because book publishing is a very similar way.
Yeah.
It's like, well, because the publisher I work with, we don't do advances. We are author driven, and it's like, well, it's usual they have it. I'm like, an advance is not what you think it is. It's a loan, and the only usually time you get a large advance in book publishing is on the first book when they don't know what it is. After the second book, it's based entirely on how many books you sold the last time. I've watched people start out at six-figure advances. They turn in their next manuscript, and the advance is 15,000 because they only sold
Yeah.
3,000 books, which for a book is great. Most books
Yeah.
only sell 500. Like,
Yeah.
to sell
Yeah.
3,000 books, you're statistically in the top 1%. But now the publisher can say, well, you only sold 3,000 books, your advance is now 15,000. And
Yeah.
people quit jobs, buy houses, have a kid, all this type of thing. And I'm kind of like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Wait until the sales figures come in and to see, because the reality is most books never pay out in terms of they never make enough money to fully pay back their advance and generate a royalty. And so I always was like, no, I'm like, if you want to pursue that, which I don't think you should anymore, but if you want to pursue that, I said, honestly, if you don't need to pay, keep your day job and
Hmm.
put that money, because the reality is it's a loan.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the same business
Yeah.
model. So no, that is very sound advice. Since I was about to say in the middle of that, like, and my book writer people, take out music and album and just insert book and publishing
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
It's the
That's
same
Yeah,
principle.
that's why you mentioned that, but like so like the main kind of group of people that I really help in my community is 9 to 5 creatives. So they have a 9 to 5 job, but they either want to monetize their music or they want to write a book. And so I teach them the steps for each side, what they need to do in order to do it successfully, not go broke, and still have like a platform to then do the launch. Because
Yeah,
writing the book is half the battle. But once you finish it, you got to publicize, you got to keep it out there, keep it relevant. That's even harder. And
yeah,
so it's just so interesting that, it's not a signing bonus. I say this is
no,
not a signing bonus. This is a loan.
yeah, absolutely.
Oops, I think you went on mute real quick. I can't hear you. Hold on. There you go.
Yeah, sorry, I was moving something. Um, but thank you so much for coming. This has been an absolutely delightful conversation. I appreciate it. I have a funny anecdote I'll tell you after we're done, but
Okay.
why don't you let us know where we can find you online and keep up with you and buy the book?
Yes, yes. So, if there are any artists that are listening to this, particularly music artists, and they want to talk about the music business or doing some of their art, just amaniexperience.com/call. Set up a free call with me. That's what I do. You can find the book on Amazon, and my socials are Amani Experience, one word. And that's how you can find me. That's how you can reach me. I appreciate being on the show. Great questions and great conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast. That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal Podcast.